Hello, Carolina. How are you?
Good, Richard. Thanks for having me.
I am so thrilled that you're here today, that we're going to learn a little bit more about what you are doing, what your organization is doing. Let me just kind of set the stage really quickly. We are joined by Carolina Sommer, the CEO and founder of the Be a Hero Research Foundation and the co-founder of the Northwest Rare Disease Coalition. But you're also an author, you're also a lobbyist, you're also a PI or principal investigator. You wear a lot of hats, Carolina.
It's interesting that you say that. I think as a rare disease patient, caregiver, you're just put into all these different roles and that you never thought you would do. But,
Right.
That's what we do for our kids. So, and
Unbelievable. Yeah.
it's the best community to be part of. So,
Yeah, I can imagine it must feel tremendously rewarding to be a part of this community, despite, oh my goodness, all of the inherent challenges that you're going through as a caregiver, as a mom, as a co-founder. Again, like I said, so many different hats that you're wearing. What I would love to kind of do to orient folks is talk a little bit about the Born a Hero Research Foundation, some of maybe the origins of it, but also, Caroline, if you could talk a little bit about you in that process too, a little bit about your background, just so our listeners have a better understanding of you. Yeah, I'd love to kind of hear a little bit more about the foundation itself, kind of its origins when you began it, and we'll talk a little bit more about mission as well. But would you mind just kind of kicking us off with maybe a little bit of the origin story?
yeah. And I think that's so important. Like it all kind of starts with the story and the journey, how we got there. So,
Right.
my daughter has a rare genetic disease. It's called Pfeiffer syndrome. And the first 5 years of her life, we spent about 6 times a month in the hospital. It was lonely. It was hard. It was isolating. It felt like a lot of people couldn't relate to. Like nobody understood. She got bullied, even aside from all the medical things that she went through. And
Right.
she is now 12 years old. She's
Wow.
had 14 surgeries, most of which have been brain surgeries.
Oh my goodness.
And this summer, she had 3 brain surgeries, and
Mm.
we almost lost her. So it was a very
Oh my
scary
gosh.
time. But I have to say, with Born a Hero, like there was a moment when she was 3 years old, and I just remember looking at her, and she just had this glow and this happiness and this fire and passion for life and people. And I just remember thinking, like, oh my gosh, like, what am I doing? Like, I want to fight alongside her. I want to
Right.
like
Right.
all
How do
for
I get in
people.
the fight? How do I
Yeah,
get in the fight with her? Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And I was like, I want to fight for kids like her, with kids with rare diseases. And I found in that, Richard, that, like the best way for me to deal with my hurt. So really it's like community that gives back to me, because like that is how I deal with things. It's like that
Yeah.
hurt is, helping these families is how I deal with my
Mhm.
hurt. And that's kind of how Born a Hero started, is just having that realization that day, that I wanted to fight. And actually on my birthday, January 2016, I
Wow.
brought family and friends, and I was like, okay, I wanted to get all their ideas, all their input and support. And so on my birthday, I had this gathering. And in 2016, that same year, we started Born a Hero Research Foundation. But so that's how kind of we got started.
I love the notion of a couple of things you just said there. One, of course, is as a mom, I can't, I'm not a mom, right? But I can't imagine, I am a parent, but I'm not a mom. I can't imagine, your desire for protection and everything must be kicking into extreme high gear at that point in time, right? Like you're going to knock down any barrier, right? But then what you just said about like, I have to join her in this fight. And this was the way that you were going to join her in this fight,
Mhm.
was by
Mhm.
the creation of this foundation, right?
Yeah.
And also what a completely unselfish act to be like, hey, on my birthday, like here's my birthday gift to you from is the creation of this foundation.
But it's like that's how you do things, though. It's like
Right.
you realize that people have all these kinds of interests,
Mhm.
and you can't do everything. And so it's
Right.
community. That's how you get all these things done. It's all, and I'll talk more about that later too, but it's just
Yeah.
That's how it happens. It's with the community and knowing who's good at what, right?
Sure.
And
No,
it's not
yeah, I mean, it's just as much as knowing where you need help and the things that you're not
Mhm.
good at and where your community can help fill in those gaps for you, right? For
Totally,
sure,
totally.
for sure.
And people want to help. So yeah.
On
So
a on
yeah,
a what you do basis, Carolina, can you talk a little bit about, obviously Born a Hero, the Northwest Disease Coalition, you're working very hard doing advocacy, doing education, other things. But can you just talk a little bit about, maybe on a day-to-day basis what you do with the coalition and the
yeah,
and Born a Hero?
absolutely. Would love that. So I would like to say that we started as a support group before we became a research foundation. And
Mm,
I think there's always just so much like work to be done like beforehand, like of
right.
understanding your community, understanding the gaps.
Hmm.
So it started small and it started just me going on Facebook, trying to understand our community, meeting with families and understanding their needs.
Right.
And also one important thing was like going to conferences, like
Hmm.
little by little going to conferences, NORD, Global Genes, Every Life Foundation. There's so many conferences out there now that it's always like, now I have to be like, okay, how
Have
many
to
do I
pick,
choose here?
yeah, pick and choose. Yeah, yeah.
But it's really through those conferences and networking that I found our researchers, that I found our
Mm,
medical advisory board. That's really how I got into policy. And I'll say, I never knew anything about policy and I was nervous about it. But when you realize how much impact you can have through policy and how much change can
yeah,
happen, it
sure.
is so powerful. And so that's kind of the start. But I also had to decide something in the beginning for myself. I decided that when I was going to start approaching people, I had to think about that nobody's less than me,
Right,
nobody is more than me,
right.
and I can't be afraid to talk to anyone. So I had to start with this mentality, and I had to remember before talking to so many different kinds of people, that I wasn't there just for myself. I was
Yeah.
there for my faith and I was there for this community. And that really helped me not feel so scared in approaching all the different types of people. So that really helps me with that, with when speaking in front of people. And and so kind of a little side note, so Born a Hero started in 2016. In 2017, we started the Seattle Rare Disease Fair in
Mm,
partnership with Seattle Children's Research Institute.
okay.
And that connection with the hospital, Richard, was so important because, for one, you always have to find out how everybody can benefit in the situation. For the
Right.
hospital, having researchers don't get to see patients, having that patient voice and the resources from us was so valuable to them. So making them see that, but also for us, like that connection with the hospital, with the children's hospital, we were on the news, we were on the radio, we were on op-eds all from the beginning, and we build all
Amazing.
these connections and community because of that one connection. And so
Right.
I think that hospital connection was really important. And so
To
anyways,
get
as
that established. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, like it was just so valuable. And so building those kind of connections for us, it was that hospital and those researchers. And then we
Mm,
started with the Born Here, we started doing this registry. We did a registry with a hospital in New York. But I will have to say something with that I learned that I think, Richard, was so valuable, is that patients have to own the data. They have to run the registries and own the data. And the
mm,
reason for that, Richard, is because with an institution as wonderful as they were to work with, and we built connections with them too, it's the consent. The consent through an institution is so long.
right.
IRB approval is expensive
Oh,
and
crazy expensive. Yeah.
forever, and it's just, and then like the scientists leave, and then where
Mhm.
does the data go?
Start over again. Yeah, yep,
Yeah,
yep,
you have to start
yep.
over again. So it has to be patient owned, patient run, and so we started this thing called the FGFR Syndromes Collaborative Research Network Conference. It was actually an idea created by David Pagenbaum, who repurposed his drug to cure his own rare disease. And so we went kind of by his model.
Mm.
And we brought in, so we did a homework again. So you always have to do your homework in the beginning of everything. There's a lot of talking to people, doing your homework. So we figured out who were the big names in the publishing, who are the big people in the science, who were the people creating the drugs. And we reached out to all those people, and we started this conference, and we brought basic, translational, clinical scientists, pharma, policy, and
Wow.
patients. And that in building that, that's how we created our registry, because we have all the voices. I'm all about community and uniting.
All the stakeholders. Yep.
Yeah, when we had all those stakeholders and all those voices, that's when we decided to create our registry. It was all based on the feedback from our community, So, and so that's kind of how we started our own registry. And yeah, and I will say a great resource is Pros Foundation. They help with registries for nonprofit organizations for rare diseases, and it's free. And so they help you sort of like pros and cons about each registry, depending on what you're interested, where you're at. And the executive director, who's a close friend of mine, is Ellen Morgan, and she has done clinical trials for over 20 years. And we do everything together now, but she's an amazing person to help with that initial registry part. And so anyways, her and I are the PIs, the principal investigators for the registry. And another thing, Richard, that I will say is the centers of excellence. Having centers of excellence is so important.
Sure.
In growing. And I'm not saying like you virtually meet with them, like going in person and meeting with these hospitals where there's specialized care for your kids it's like night and day. And what you can bring to them, again, the whole win, you have to find a way that they win. They win because you have the patient voice. You have resources for their families. So you provide all those. And how can they help you? They can bring people to your registry.
Right.
They can advise you. And we're always sending them resources. And now our centers are like working together, which is like amazing.
That's amazing. You're correct. Yeah. To even get them on the same page, right?
Yeah. It was, this is kind of newer where they're working on, we have different projects with them, and they're working on ophthalmology on this and like best outcomes and sharing data. And I'm like, oh my gosh, yay. So having that centers of excellence part has been so amazing. And one thing about the centers of excellence that this year, because of our centers of excellence, we've expanded to other countries, and we're bringing one of the only plastic surgeons for our kids in Africa to be trained at one of our centers and to train the new generation of surgeons in Africa. They're coming to be because we had that connection with those centers.
Because you have that connection in that community. Wow.
Yeah. And so that's really exciting. But also the other way that the centers can help, Richard, is because we can get second opinions for our families. Which is really amazing. Yep. And also we know exactly what person for them to contact to do out-of-state care and help with the financials and all that insurance. And, so we have that point of contact of referring our patients to these centers. So anyway, so that's kind of what we do with Born Here. And now we don't focus just on my daughter's syndrome. We focus on 15 rare diseases because they're all very similar.
Right.
And so I think finding pathways between rare diseases is so important because
there's common threads between them, right?
Yeah. There's just too many. There's over 10,000 rare diseases. And so I think that's just the way we can, uniting them is so important. And anyway, so we speak to hospitals, researchers, surgeons, because, and I invite myself, Richard, I will
why not? Yeah.
Yeah, I told, when there was a national plastic surgeon conference, I was like, I need to be there because I need to represent the patient voice and to the researchers. And then they're like, and sometimes I'll be the only patient voice, but it's just so important to bring yourself to those conversations and to tell them the value in that. You have to make them believe in the value of that.
Yeah.
And it's so important. How can you do research and innovation in anything if you don't have the patient voice? That's
absolutely has to be there. Has to be
there. Yeah. So anyway, so that's
I appreciate so many things that you just said, Carolina. I'm going to go all the way back to when you said the idea of you had to have humility and be humble, because like you said, I'm not better than anyone else. No one else is better than me. But you also had to balance that humility with the self-confidence to put your hand up and say, I'm going to that conference. I need to be the patient voice in the room. And then, what you said about the centers of excellence and the importance there, owning the registry. I mean, that is something that I didn't even think about until you just said it. The patients have to have the responsibility for their
Yeah.
own research registry,
Yeah.
because like you said, things turn over, changes happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's so many great pieces of advice you're giving here. The relationships with the providers, your
Mhm.
conferences. Gosh, there's so
And
much that
Richard,
you're
I'll
getting
say
at.
something like
Yeah.
I had a colleague and she was working with an institution and it's hard to get a lot of money for these rare diseases. And she spent
Mm.
millions in their research and they signed a contract and something, the way it was worded or something, she lost all of that data. She had to
Wow.
start all over again. Anyway, so it's just, it's just important, just again to highlight that it's important for the patients
Yeah.
to be
Yeah.
owning the data. For us, the institution was amazing. It's just that, but yeah, it's just the processes are hard
Mm.
and it's a unifying place, right? You have to
Right.
unify data. So
Right.
the patients can sort of be that unifying voice with the registries between, the patients and the researchers, but also pharma,
Right.
so you kind of, by patients owning that, you really get to sort of, yeah, sort of unite everybody.
Yeah, yeah, no, I have some experience working on an implantable device registry. I
Mhm.
built a North
Oh,
American implantable device registry to track, implantable devices in folks. But to your point, the big piece of it was to try to do that triangulation between
mhm.
the device manufacturers, the pharmaceutical providers, the providers themselves, the hospitals, the patient
Mhm.
community, right? So it's so
Mhm.
important to
Mhm.
have that. I don't know. In some cases, it's a triangle. In some cases, it's probably an octagon because you've got
Yeah.
so many stakeholders, right?
That's right.
That are part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You've
Yeah,
had
absolutely.
some success, Carolina. You and I were talking about this
Yeah.
earlier in some of the industry partnerships. So kind of speaking of industry, right? Some of the industry
Right.
partnerships that you've been
Yeah,
able
yeah,
to
absolutely.
create. Some of the work that you've been able to do with payers, which we know payers it certainly can be challenging, especially with a rare disease and they don't understand the disease. So they don't have their own medical policy even developed yet, right? So talk to us a little bit about the successes that you've had in sort of the industry partnership realm as well as in the health plan, health payer realm.
Yeah, yeah. And so I guess I'll step a little bit back if that's okay.
Well,
So
please. Yeah.
with with the fair kind of grew the coalition, and this is where these partnerships became. And because again, I want to step back because it starts with community again.
Right.
I really strongly believe in that. So the fair grew, all the stakeholders started to come, into the fair. And and so the Northwest Rare Disease Coalition, I'll kind of say our bucket list. We're ending the diagnostic odyssey, better outcomes for families, building community and education. And this will lead to the pairs a little bit after this
Sure.
because
Please take your time. Yeah.
again, it starts with the community. So I just want to kind of like build to that.
Mhm.
And so we kind of have these 4 bucket lists. And a lot of these buckets are filled with policy initiatives. So you
Mhm.
have the RDAC, whole genome sequencing, newborn screening, complex care coordination, caregivers getting paid, all these different, we do all of that. But, building community is one of our bucket lists. And this is
Mhm.
where the peer forum comes in.
Mhm.
So the fair is one of those things. The
Sure.
pair forum we started this year, which was one of those things. And we brought 7 insurance companies into it. And it was so
Wow.
cool, Richard.
That's
It
very
was
cool. Yeah.
United Healthcare, Blue Cross Blue Shield. And I'll have to say, now that you mentioned what you said, like bringing them in, we had to be so careful in how
Right.
we approach them. And, we're like, we're going to protect you. We're going to, we're on your side. Like we
Right.
really like, and it was kind of like once one pair started, being interested, then the
Well, it's
other
always
one.
a domino. One of them has to go
Yeah,
first. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. It was
Yeah.
totally like this domino effect thing, but it was like we were so careful in how we invited and like we're going to take care of you. We're here to learn from you. We want to work with you. We want to share with you. So it was very like a lot of prepping for this
Mhm.
pair. And when we were there, it was so cool to see the pairs and the industry and patients all speaking. After the event, Richard, I asked Blue Cross Blue Shield, one of the leaders there, I said, So how did you feel when we invited you?
Why did you?
Honestly,
Yeah.
yeah. How did you like? And she's like, honestly, like our whole company was like, what do they want?
What's
Like,
happening? Yeah. What is this about?
what do they want us to be here for? Like, why? They were hesitant, and
Sure.
then they were like, and she was like, but I felt so welcomed. I had no
Wow.
idea. Like, it was just sort of this. She's like, we didn't know what to expect.
Right.
But the thing is, like, Richard, in our pair forums, we have the uncomfortable conversations.
Yep.
The conversations that
Important.
nobody wants to talk about, we do
Important.
it.
Yeah.
And we don't have a lot of presentations. We
Mm.
have a lot of conversation at
That's
our
great. Yeah,
events.
because nobody wants to sit through a bunch of
Yeah.
PowerPoint slides on different FGFR syndromes, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
We
Yeah.
talk about it. We talk
Sure.
about the things that, like, we don't try to guess what everyone's thinking. We talk about what everyone's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
We have the patient voice at every single like panel, every single part of everything we do. So here's one thing that I'll tell you that I learned from the pairs that I just wanted to share with you because of what you said about that, how important that relationship is. So first of all, everyone's trying to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Pharma's trying to do the right thing. Payers are trying to do the right thing. There's so much stigma around everything. We have to learn how to see the positive in people, how to love people, how to like
Right.
meet people where they're at. People are
Right.
trying to do the right thing. Richard,
Right.
that's what I've learned.
Yeah.
They're good
They
and
may
bad.
lose their navigation, their waypoint along the way, but they are trying to do the right thing.
They're
Right? So
trying to do the right.
how do you help
Absolutely.
them? Right? How do you
Yeah,
help them to do the right thing? Yeah.
exactly. They're trying to do their thing. And there's good and bad people no matter where you are. There is. And you can't just say that because one person's like that everyone is. Most of the most amazing scientists I know are in pharmaceutical companies, the most amazing and kindest people.
Right.
And there's so much stigma and a
Sure.
lot of these people are trying to do things, and the pairs are too. And here's one thing that I learned about the pairs. So they thought of it like this. And this is, I thought, was really important for us to think about pairs. So everyone thinks of them as, somebody that they're fighting against, somebody that, but they're like, the way they put it is like, they're like a bank. Okay. So they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
Right. So they're a bank and they have to figure out where they're going to put their money.
Their money. Yeah, absolutely. Where are they
If
spending
they don't know about rare diseases, how are they going to know to do that?
Right.
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 So,
Well, I mean, like everyone else, payers have the same limited resources that we all have, right? And
exactly.
they look at their member population, and they, clearly they could just focus on the big major chronic diseases that are plaguing our population: diabetes, depression, congestive heart failure, or whatever, and just focus on that, right? And not put anything into anything else. But they don't know what they don't know. Right.
Exactly.
So if you could start to educate them on other things, other opportunities for them to put their resources towards, and just maybe they might do that. Right.
Exactly. No, exactly. And honestly, like in talking to them, they're like, we had no idea. They had no idea what was going on. I mean, they just didn't know.
Yeah.
20 years ago, industry started putting, sort of the patient name into things. And that's what we need to do with insurance companies too. Have that patient representation. And so now, we're working on a bunch of projects with them, just like that. And they want the patient voice, and but see, we had to hear each other. They had no idea. We had no idea, but we were making all these assumptions about each other. So we just have to meet. I mean, it's like this crazy thing. It's like that in legislation as well. I'm like, why are we? Like, everyone's assuming everything about everyone's. I'm like, why don't we just like talk about it? Like, just say it, and it creates so many barriers, and we just have to assume the good in people and assume that people are trying to do the thing, because most people are. Most people are. And so how do we work with that? And how do we meet each other? But it's not just about sharing our stories with insurance companies. It's about evidence. They need the evidence, they need the story with the evidence, right?
Yep.
And so I think for rare diseases, we're trying to think about how can we think of rare diseases right now as, and this is something we're working on, as a unit instead of like individual, like patient.
And I wanted to ask
a unit of a family. And so that's kind of what we're thinking about and going to survey and that kind of thing. So
I wanted to ask you a little bit about that, in the notion of, before you even said unit, like, just the idea of like, you are not just treating the individual patient, right? Because the caregiver is part of this, the care provider is part of this. So
Totally.
yeah, so as you think about, I have two questions for you, I guess, Carolina. So one is, as you think about this unit, right, and the exploration you're doing there, I would love to hear a little bit more about that. But then also, you had mentioned a few minutes ago that there's like 20 syndromes that you're supporting now, right? If I remember
Yeah,
correctly.
15, yeah.
How do you, I mean, that's a lot. Like, how do you prioritize and sort of, divide your time between all of that?
Yeah.
I'm curious about some of the mechanics of that, I guess, Carolina.
Yeah. Yeah. So you just don't do any of it alone. And
Right. It goes back to community again, right?
it goes back to community.
Yeah.
So in the coalition, it's three of us that founded it. We have
Mm.
a policy leader, a lobbyist, Max. We have Joshua with industry guy. I'm the advocacy person.
Mhm.
It's all teams. And you know what? And here's the community based part, Richard. It's like you, yeah, like we're working on projects with pharma companies.
Mhm.
We're working on projects with insurance companies. We're working on projects with all these different groups. But here, I'll tell you how we got there. So one of the things that I like to do, and this is one of the advices that I have, is getting to know everybody. I'm not
Mm.
saying getting to know as in like really listening to people. So
Right.
I have a
Right.
notebook for every different kinds of people and every different kind of group and the different projects. So with pharma companies and with insurance companies, this is why it's important. With pharmaceutical companies, every time I talk to them with our partners, I write down, I learn about them. I'm not talking as much. I am listening. I do
Right.
tell them, this is what we're doing. This is what we're interested in. What are you interested in? What are you
Right.
doing?
Right.
Tell me more. Like, I know with all our pharma companies, I know what diseases they're interested, whether there's neurological, cardiovascular. I know what specific projects they're interested. Is it cell and gene therapy education? Is it whole genome sequencing? Is it newborn screening? They're all interested in
They're all
different.
different. And yeah. Yep.
I take notes on everything, and I try to
Right.
figure out like where we can meet each other. And it's not always immediate that I
Sure.
know we are.
It might take a little while to develop that, for sure.
Exactly.
Yep. Yep.
Exactly. But and now we're working with Illumina on something, Ultragenics on something, Alexion on something. And so it's not just like we're getting funding. We work on them in projects. We're
Right.
like, how can we work together in this? How can we support each other? We attend some other conferences. We speak at their events. And so it's like it's knowing what everybody's interested in and
Sure.
taking notes and all that. For patients, why this is important. So I speak to a lot of advocates constantly. I take notes. I take notes on their diagnostic journey. I take notes on, and how does that help?
Mm-hmm.
It helps me with community. It helps me because now when we do policy stuff, I'm
Right.
like, oh, I know exactly who's good at talking about cost. I know who's good talking about it, navigating insurance. I know who's good at talking about their diagnostic journey. And so, just getting to know everybody and really listening to your stakeholders and your community. I know what our peers are interested in. And then you just work on projects with them.
Yeah.
And as things come up, you ask, can we get your feedback on this? Engaging people as much as you can with things. So like we can't take everything on, but guess what? Illumina is going to do this project for us.
Sure. Sure.
And so it's really, so I'm not good at a lot of things. So I have to know what people are interested. I have to be good at knowing how to delegate
Yeah.
and understand what people's interests and needs are. And by doing that and by having those relationships, I can just sort of, I know where to
Yeah.
direct people. I know where to.
Yeah.
So I think,
I appreciate you giving us the insight into your methodology here, Carolina, right? Like you said, the sort of intrinsic note taking that you're doing, really learning about people, really understanding them, not at a superficial level or just like, hey, they have two cats and they like to go here for a vacation or whatever, but really kind of understanding
yeah,
these things. And then I like how you talk about then how you apply that to different situations. Like, hey, who do I know that's really great at advocacy? Oh, that's Pam, right? I
mm-hmm.
remember that from our conversation. I can go back, I can look at my notes, I can reference that. Or, who do I know? And also just the idea of like, of course you have to use other resources for these projects because you're a small foundation, you're limited in what you
Mm-hmm.
can do, right? So again, it goes
Mm-hmm.
back to community partnerships. And it sounds like
You don't
That's
have to do anything alone. That's the best
right.
part. And
Yeah.
like the more you collaborate, the more successful you are. It's like this
Yeah.
win-win for everybody if you can realize that,
Yeah,
that
for sure. For
you're more
sure.
efficient, you're just better off being that collaborator and
Mhm.
that peacemaker and and it's not just like learning them. It's also like it's not just learning about them too, Richard. It's also like building families through this.
Mhm.
I mean, even with our colleagues, with our partners, with our patients, we show up to their things. It's not
Right.
just about receiving, it's about giving back. How can we help you?
Mhm. Right.
And it's about going to their walks, going to their fundraising events, helping them advocate when they need you, helping them move, helping them when they have medical issues. It's
Yeah.
like
Well, you're
it's
giving just as much as you're receiving. I mean, that sounds
yeah.
like a really, yeah, really
Mhm.
important credo that you're living by, which is like, hey, it's not just what you can do for us. Like, what can we
Mhm.
also do for you? Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that creates a welcoming atmosphere, and
Sure.
people wanna help when you're
Right.
collaborative,
Right.
people wanna follow that, and so I
Right.
think it's so important, and I also will say that, you know, whether an opportunity is big or small, like, it's all important, like, you can learn something from everyone, I can guarantee you, like, especially
Hmm.
in this rare disease community,
Right.
like, they're just, like, full of resources and
Hmm.
full of knowledge, and um, I just I just really believe that you have to take every opportunity and
Yeah.
every help you can do is important. From patients to talking to big pharma companies to talking to
Yeah.
whoever it is to payers. It's all really important. So and you
Very
have to
important. Yeah.
yeah every person that you talk to. So
You've got a lot going on between, we talked a little bit about the collaborative research network, the rare disease fairs, your registries. Um, Talk to me a little bit more, Carolina, about some of the new and emerging ideas that you guys may be kind of working on. I guess really as much as you can talk about it, what's next for Born a Hero and the Northwest Rare Disease Coalition? What are some of the things you're most looking forward to, I guess?
yeah, I mean they're really different organizations,
Mm,
but with Born a Hero, I'm really excited about the centers of excellence, the registry, working with pharma, working just I can't tell you how cool it is just to feel all these people connecting and talking and
mm,
and what that means with efficiency and for our families. But for the coalition, we're just working on a lot of state and federal policy. And
mhm.
I'll say one of the projects that I'm really excited about right now is complex care coordination,
Oh,
Richard. And this is what I mean about listening. Like Richard is like, I meet with rare disease moms every few months here in our state.
okay.
And my daughter sees 16 different specialists. Okay. And she has a craniofacial team. And so we're lucky because they kind of manage her care.
Hmm.
And then going to meeting with these moms, I realized that none of them had that. They're managing all this care all by themselves.
Wow. Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh, like how, like, they're just trying to survive, right?
Right.
Like they're
Right.
a lot of times one parent loses their job and this is their daily life. They're changing diapers, there's behavior issues.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
these are some of the things that people
They're
don't
just trying to get
understand.
through yeah, they're just trying to get through. Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
feeding takes forever. I mean, it's like you're changing diapers, you're picking up puke, this is what our families are going through. And this is the
Right.
daily stuff that people don't understand that they
Right.
have to go through.
Right.
And then navigating
You don't
and
drop in and
sharing.
out of this stuff, right? It's all the
Yeah,
time. Yeah.
it's all
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Navigating insurance, like
Hmm.
appointments. Oh my gosh, I can't tell you how many appointments these families have. Like, oh my gosh, it's just all, and then having to think about coordinating care. They just don't have time, or they just can't. It's just too much, like
Hmm.
for them to try to think about coordinating that. So I get asked, should I go to my GI? Should I go to this? And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. And so,
Yeah.
anyways, so we're trying to do this thing. We're trying to do this evidence-based study this year. I'm really passionate about. We're trying to raise funds. We need to raise $250,000 to do this pilot study.
Okay.
And it's going to be at 4 hospitals. And it's again this collaboration between the hospitals and payers.
Hmm.
And the thing that's exciting about this is we're trying to prove we're trying to do evidence-based research to prove sort of the cost savings and how much this would help families to have that care coordination,
Right.
and so the thing is here, Richard, is that at the hospitals, at the research institutes, most of the research that's being done is on rare diseases.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the kids that are being treated at the hospital are chronic pain, medically complex, rare disease patients, and yet there's no voice for them.
Right. Right.
They have no
Right.
voice. There is not a place where they can go to get that care coordination. It's not expensive. It's not expensive.
Right.
It's very simple. It will help them reduce costs, and it will help save our families. And so we're trying to prove all this stuff so that we can turn that into a piece of federal legislation. So this is our goal this year, is to do that study.
Outstanding. That's outstanding. And it's hard for me to wrap my head around the fact that, that these basic care coordination services don't already exist, Carolina, too. So much of what you said, right, around how that if we had some just basic care coordination services here, there would be such an opportunity to, number one, take a huge burden off the caregivers themselves, right, the parents. Two, to be able to look at opportunities for ways you could maximize efficiency of services, other types of things, right? I mean, anyone who knows anything about care coordination knows at the end of the day, that's what it's all about, right? It's all about making sure that there is a plan and you're working to that plan and you adjust the plan, right, as things go along. It makes me a little sad to think that you have to put a pilot study in place, an evidence-based research study in place to prove that to people so you could get federal legislation passed. But at the same time, I'm really encouraged to hear that you guys are taking that on.
And it's like time is everything for our families. I mean, if you're not treating families in the right time, then that's when you get secondary conditions, and it's just it gets big really fast, and I'll say, I always like to share this story. My daughter at the age of 5 had 3 surgeries, and there's a little girl in another state that had like 35 surgeries at the age of 5, same age, same level of severity. But because she wasn't treated in the right center at the right time, and I think she passed away. So it's so important to be at the right centers, but also do things in a timely manner. If my daughter hadn't, if my daughter hadn't been, if we were so close to her having been paralyzed or had brain damage, just the timing of that could have meant that for us, so
I understand.
It's just, and imagine the cost for that, and imagine what that would have meant for our family, so
catastrophic. Absolutely.
And the other thing that I'm really, really pushing to support is Access to Genetic Counseling Service Act. And I'll tell you why I'm so passionate about this bill. It's a piece of federal legislation we're supporting. And so we're not the ones leading it, but we're supporting it. And basically, the reason why that's important is because genetic counselors, Richard, get paid $25 for a 45-minute in-person session. Not anything they do before, not anything they do after.
They do afterwards.
They don't get reimbursement. And so there's a shortage of genetic counselors all over the world. There's a shortage all over the world. There's no incentive. There's no incentive to have more.
For people to enter the field.
And then physicians don't even know how to refer a patient to a genetic counselor. There was a study done in North Carolina, like over 90%, I remember. They don't know how to refer a patient to a genetic counselor. So we're talking about this diagnostic odyssey. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like we have to do some foundational work.
To figure that out.
And then I think of that as innovation too. Like, how do we think about innovation when we can't get people diagnosed? Like it's hard to think about that for me and so that's why we feel really passionate about this piece of legislation, for example. I mean, there's a lot of great legislation going on right now, but I'm just saying those are some of the two that I'm really passionate about.
Really excited about.
And whole genome sequencing is one that is going to be really impactful too. And anyway, so those are getting caregivers paid. There's a shortage of nurses. Why don't you just pay the caregivers? So those are the bills that we really feel passionate about. Just to give you a few that we're working.
That's phenomenal. Where I live in Massachusetts, we've had legislation around paying caregivers. To your point, right? Those types of Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah.
I just some of those just really make sense, and it's one of those. There's some of those bills like with the whole genome sequencing too. It's like those are all bills that I'm like they're no brainers to me. Like they're just sort of like everybody wins kind of situation. I
Right.
guess. I mean, everybody wins. It's
Right.
those
So
kind
why
of
not do
bills.
it? Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody's
Absolutely.
winning. Everybody's benefiting. The patients,
Mhm.
the cost savings. It's just bills like that. I really like. Where it's bipartisan. Everybody's benefiting. We're
Yeah.
saving.
Let's get it done. Right. Let's get it done. Let's get everybody on board
And
and get it
I'll
done. Yeah.
say, and so yeah, so we do like ending the diagnostics odyssey, better outcomes for families, but like the building community I talked about. But the other part that I think is really important and is not very costly that I think we feel passionate about is education,
Mhm.
Richard. So like, education around genetic testing, education around cell and gene therapy, education about complex care coordination. But for like cell and gene therapy, we have to prepare people for what's coming. There are like over 3,000 therapies being done right now, being
Mm.
developed. We have to pave that way. We have to start having these kind of conversations with.
Right. So people know what's coming. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I think there's a lot we can do that
Mm.
is simple. With one of the things that we do, for example, with the genetic testing education, is that we try to sort of educate the new generation of genetic counselors, and we're doing a toolkit with Illumina on this
Mhm.
so that other states can do it as well. So there's just a lot of education that I think we could do, like for
Outstanding. Yeah.
for payers, for patients, for legislators. But we don't have to wait until we're there with innovation. We can start doing a lot of that education now. So,
Right. Right.
and some of our pharma companies partners have amazing resources, and so it's just
Yeah.
we just need
Making
to work
those.
together.
Yeah. Taking advantage of those partnerships and doing more
Yeah,
together. Right. Yeah.
they
Carolina.
have amazing
Wonderful.
resources. So how can we get those those
Mhm.
numbers out there and those things heard? How can we help the pharma do that? How can they help us? It's just it really is. The more we collaborate, the better.
The better. Yeah. Right. I
Mhm.
love the themes I'm hearing here of community, of coordination, of collaboration. Carolina, thank you so much for telling us all about the work that you're doing with Born a Hero, the success that you've had. We wish you a lot more success. I think this conversation was filled with a lot of very practical advice for folks who are maybe embarking upon the same journey that you're embarking on. So, Carolina, thank you so much. Carolina Sommer, the Born a Hero Research Foundation, bornahero.org is the website. And please keep up the great work you're doing. Thank
We
you.
have a new website coming up soon, so
All right. Well, we'll keep an eye out for that as well. Awesome. Well, thank you once again. And we look
Thank
forward
you,
to
Richard.
speaking again with you soon.
It was wonderful to be here with you. Thank you so much. I appreciate what you're doing and helping our families too. So I
Wonderful.
appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you. Awesome.